Good evening, how are you? I'm going to this evening rank the best Cat Stevens albums. I'm a big Cat Stevens fan. I started liking Cat Stevens, I think, when I was 13 or 14, and he was a very influential part of my growing up. I think I just always enjoyed his music so much, and especially when I was a kid, I was really into the acoustic guitar. John Denver was popular at that time, and James Taylor, and Elton John was piano based, but he was a similar artist in that he was kind of a singer-songwriter. And that was a great period, the early 70s, when there was a lot of folk music and the kind of personal, some would say sensitive artists like Cat Stevens, Don McLean, Harry Chapin. There were so many. And I think by the late 70s, that period had kind of, the record companies had decided to kind of move away from that, and of course times had changed. And then Cat Stevens, I think, in the late 70s converted to Islam. And unbeknownst to many of his fans, but even the last year or two of his active career, he was just fulfilling some contract obligations and moving on. But he left a great legacy, and then for about 20 years, he didn't play music at all. I saw an interview with him on a DVD I got a while ago. It was a concert he had done in the 70s, I think at William and Mary College, and there was in the special features. That was back when you could get special features. They had some interviews with him today, and the story he told was his kids started coming home from school, and of course he hadn't played a guitar in so many years, and he was Yusuf Islam and very involved in the Muslim community there in London, which apparently is very active and engaged. But his kids started coming home from school when they were little, it was just whatever. But when they got, into their teenage years, they started coming home and saying like, "Hey Dad, all my friends say you're Cat Stevens and you're this awesome star, and here you are in the house, doing the laundry or whatever. They tell me you're Cat Stevens. Are you this guy named Cat Stevens?" And he sort of said yes. And then one day his kid left out a guitar for him, and I guess no one was home, and he started playing it. And he said he came right back to him. You often hear that from people like that haven't played in a long time, or bands that haven't played in a long time, but used to play all the time. They get back together, and it's sort of like falling off a log or riding a bike or something, and he started playing, and that was the beginning of his revived career. And he has done a few albums since then. In his new incarnation, I actually heard some. I liked it, what I heard, but this is the classic Cat Stevens as Cat Stevens albums, and I made a little ranking. And let me just preface this by saying they're all good albums. Some I think were a little more uneven than others, but I have a lot of respect for Cat Stevens, and I think all his albums were done with artistic integrity, even some of his more pop star stuff, and some of the things that he did maybe to try to stay current towards the end of his career when music was changing. That I think he always approached things with the sense of wanting to have excellence in his artistry, and also, artistic integrity and expression. I also wanted to say I think Cat Stevens is one of many artists from that period that always reminds me of English Lit class. I don't know, Silent Sunlight, so many of those songs, when I listen to them, it reminds me of, back in the 70s, sitting in a kind of a cool English Lit class. I wish I had paid more attention when they were reading some of the other things, but I do remember poetry and the connection of literature and music, and thinking about that. But let's start with the ranking here. I just happened to, one of the reasons I did Cat Stevens, I happen to have all his old vinyl records. That's not the case with, I'm going to be doing some other records. But this is It So, if you can see it. And like all Cat Stevens records, kudos. He had great album covers, I think, from the beginning to the end. Maybe the last one, I think, was a little bit toned down, but he had, that was, I don't mean to sound like an old man pining for the old days, but they really had nice album covers in those days, photography. This one, I think this is his number 11. I'm ranking down to number 1. So in my opinion, or in terms of my taste, this was my least favorite album. That doesn't mean I don't like it, but this was what I put as last. And I would kind of say that about the cover. It's kind of nice. Now, I say I put it last. When he did this album, I think it was in the mid-'70s. I remember I bought this when it was out. So this is a copy of the album like the week it came out, and I still have it. I bought it at Johnny B. Good's record and tape store back in Wheaton, Illinois. And I'm Facebook friends with the guy that owns that store. So if he sees this, I bought this record at your store. Maybe a couple of the other Cat Stevens records here, but this one for sure. I remember the dad bought it. It hadn't been out for a couple days. I like this album. He was going a little experimental at this time, and I think he was trying to change things up. He'd kind of been moving. The core, I think what people associate Cat Stevens with is that acoustic guitar, kind of folksy, but English folksy, not Americana folksy. And that was a cool thing about Cat Stevens. It was English folk music, which is similar in, chord structure, finger picking, but there's a different flavor to it, kind of like our languages. We all speak England, they speak English, we speak English, but there's a different flavor, there's a different accent. And he was English folk music. I think that's what people associate him with. This is not only more keyboard based, but it's got some experimental things with some of the early synthesizers at the time. And I think a lot of he was trying to attract new fans. Maybe, I don't know. That's what I've heard. And like a lot of times when you try to do that, maybe you lose some of your old fans. I know that was kind of my reaction. Although I never said I didn't like the album, but I remember not listening to it as much. It does, however, have a couple really nice songs in it. I know Old Schoolyard, Cat Stevens, I've heard him say was one of his favorite songs, and I think he did a musical called Moonshadow, and that's featured in there. So there are always some good Cat Stevens, when he writes songs, there are always some good ones. Another good one on here is I Never Wanted to Be a Star, which you can kind of see, which is kind of a rip on the music industry. Or I don't know if he's being critical or negative, but he certainly sounds like he's kind of tired of it. I don't want to just be another bean in the pop machine. I never wanted to be a star, buy my mom a Ferrari car. But the one I really like on here is Child for a Day. Now I'm going to check. I can't read. I can't read without my glasses. I don't think he wrote Child for a Day, which is, he did do a cover now and then. But if you ever get a chance to see a movie called First Love, it stars Susan Day from the Partridge Family. All I'm going to say is if you like Susan Day, and she was a great actress, but she's in that movie with the guy that played in, I forget, but she's in that movie, and it's based on, I think, Madame Bovary. But it was filmed at Reed College, and the song Child for a Day is in that movie. And I don't think Cat Stevens wrote that song. I might stand corrected, but it's really nice. It's got a nice guitar solo in it. So there are definitely some good songs in here. I wasn't as crazy about some of the more experimental things, but then again, I'm kind of reviving my feelings about it when I was 16, or however old I was when I bought it. So, but if you collect Cat Stevens records and are interested in his history as an artist, any of these are must-haves because, he was only really active in that kind of heyday period for 12 or 13 years, and so you want them all, and this is one. But I put this last. So I don't know if that's fair or not. I'm not saying it's a bad album, but I put it last. Something had to be last. The next one, which I guess would be number 10, is, I guess we're up, Matthew and Son. It looks like I don't know, I guess the camera's backwards, but this is Matthew and Son. This is his first album he ever did in the 60s. And here he was a pop star. When he first came out, he was just a kid. I think he was just in his teens still. And they kind of, and he was just a kid, and they kind of, he had handlers more. He didn't have as much control over his career at that time. And they dressed him up like a pop star, He almost kind of dressed like the Moody Blues or very late 60s kind of mod. But he did a lot of that kind of British bubblegum pop music, almost like Ferry Across the Mersey and some of those songs. But this is a pretty good album, but it's his first album, and it's almost like another Cat Stevens. It's almost as different from his famous stuff as some of his later material that he did when he was more influenced by Arabic music and so on, as Yusuf Islam. So it's quite different, but you can still hear the Cat Stevens, his identity, his sense of lyrics, his songwriting is still in here. And probably the most famous song on this record is Here Comes My Baby. which again is a great kind of kids bubblegum song. And by the way, that's a side of Cat Stevens that we don't often hear about. But he, like he did that Sam Cooke song, Another Saturday Night and I Ain't Got No Buddy. Didn't he do recently, I'm Just a Soul Whose Intentions Are Good, Oh Lord, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. So he's always kind of, I think he likes that. I mean, I'm not, and this is kind of like that. But the song that's on here that's really good is Here Comes My Baby, Here She Comes Now. Walking along with the love, whatever the lyrics are. But it's a catchy song. Once you hear it, you'll always remember. I'm not sure if anything from this one was in Harold and Maude, which was a popular movie. I'm Gonna Get a Gun. I Love My Dog As Much As I Love You. I think he was a kid when he wrote a lot of those songs. You maybe say he has more maturity as well as more creative independence on his more famous albums. But this is a good one, and this is also, by the way, that early career was cut short by I think about with tuberculosis, and he was confined to a sanitarium for quite a while. And when he came out of that is when he had written, and when he had really not only in a way that was kind of a reset for his career, not only inside him, but I think he was kind of out of the scene for a while. And then when he came back was when he he looked more kind of like a hippie and did all those great songs that we all love. But this is Matthew and Son. I put this down. I have 11 records there. This was number 10. Number 9 is New Masters. This is his second pop star album. You can see there he's kind of dressed like a pop star, kind of Baroque looking figure. And again, it's got a lot of songs on it you would probably never have heard of. But it's a good album. It's worth listening to. First of all, it's an enjoyable album. Second of all, it's part of his discography. And so if you like Cat Stevens, it's definitely worth listening to. But the one on here that I think really shows he was just a kid when he wrote it, but it shows his greatness as a songwriter, is The First Cut Is the Deepest. That track is on here, and it's done pretty differently than you often hear it today. I forget, my favorite version of that song is by Rod Stewart, which was popular when I was in high school. I love Rod Stewart's a great artist, by the way. Always writes his own good songs, but he's also someone that's not afraid to do other people's music and make it his own. And I think one of the best covers Rod Stewart ever did is The First Cut Is the Deepest, which is a great song. It's got a beautiful guitar solo in it, by the way. But this is where it came from, this album. So The First Cut Is the Deepest. So I'm not saying it's a bad album, but I think it's kind of overlooked in his records. But it that particular song shows, I think, something that was to come. And a great song. You can do it a million ways. So Rod Stewart took it and turned it into a beautiful song, and others have done The First Cut Is the Deepest too, and it's a beautiful song. Okay, now we're getting into some of his more famous records that if you like Cat Stevens you will know, and you might not agree with some of my takes. Maybe you already disagree with me on some, but we're going to keep going, and I'm going to tell you what I think. I guess we're this would be number 8. Some might have put this higher, but I put Foreigner. Cat Stevens, Foreigner. Let's see if I still have the... I still do. I still have the picture. That's a Cat Stevens drawing. So, you know what I don't have in there is the record. Holy mackerel, I don't have the record. But these albums were great for art, especially when he got started to have more control. That's one thing I miss about vinyl. Look at that. You got a beautiful corrugate, nice card post. What is that? Cardstock. An original Cat Stevens drawing, photography. But this is Foreigner, and it's a good album. There are a couple good songs on it, and I think it came out at the height of his popularity. And I don't think it did that well. You might want to check the sales. I think when this came out, was it 73? He'd already had Teaser and the Firecat out, Catch Bullet 4 out, and Tea for the Tillerman out, which are probably his 3 greatest albums. So, and this was pretty different. All those albums were more acoustic music based. Catch Bullet 4 is a little bit more electric and rocky in spots. But this was quite a departure. But I think, like a lot of things, I think it had artistic integrity. But I've had this album since it came out. The first side, of course, we're still talking vinyl. The first side is the Foreigner Suite, and that's like a 18 and a half minute long song. And you have to remember, that's back when Yes, Close to the Edge, and Rick Wakeman, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer were in, and even like Who, that was prog rock, and so at the time, I think I maybe respect it. I respect it more now than I might have at the time, because what it really is 18 minutes of little bits and pieces of songs kind of assembled together. And any one of those songs could have been a great song. I guess the take you often hear on it is it didn't work as a whole. I don't know if that's true. I'd have, maybe I should listen to it again. But there are some good songs on here. I think the best song on here is The Hurt, and then 100 I Dream are good songs. But that Foreigner Suite takes up half the record, and then there are 4 songs on side 2. In Foreigner Suite, I listened to it some. I used to listen to all these albums, and it's interesting. I used to try to kind of get into it. Maybe I was too young for it, but you would just start to kind of get into something, and then it would change. Kind of like Richard Wagner, or I always like when you get a nice thing, you keep going with what's nice, and it would change. But I'd have to listen to it again, and I listen to it once in a while. But anyway, I'm not saying it's a bad album, and I think it's a try to do something different. I don't know what the entire story of the recording is, but I think it was considered, it wasn't like he had to rush it or something like that, or put out something he wasn't satisfied with. So I think it was in true Cat Stevens form an attempt to do something, a little bit more. To try something new, which any good artist does, and that's what this is. How successful it was, you be the judge. It's a good album. There's some great songs. 100 I Dream and The Hurt are really fine songs. All right, number 7 is Back to Earth. Back to Earth. This, I believe, was his last album as Cat Stevens, and when he did this, he was already Muslim and calling himself Yusuf Islam, but for record contract reasons, he was still known as Cat Stevens. So he was still officially, in terms of the music business, Cat Stevens. And I read more about this record. Look at our dog got that one years ago, but it's a shame. These are kind of nice, all these vinyl records. But everybody kind of knew that this was the end, and so I guess it was kind of a sad recording. And there weren't a lot of sort of breakthroughs. I guess because he was leaving the industry, it was never promoted that much. So I remember hearing a few of these. I remember hearing Just Another Night and Bad Breaks are 2 on here that you used to hear on FM radio, because FM radio would play all kinds of things back. You'd hear like Deep Purple, Highway Star, and then Morning Is Broken, on FM radio, which was great. No artificial categories made by people in suits. It was just all music, whatever was good, within the cultural framework of hippies and youth and smoking pot or whatever. But this is a pretty good album, but I don't think it ever broke through. But I think it was kind of more of a return to his roots right before he went out. And so Back to Earth. Okay, are we on number 6? Actually, when I was thinking about it, I almost wanted to rank this like in the top 2 or 3. It's actually the first album he did, and that's, again, Cat Stevens art. See that? Isn't that cool? There's this picture on the back. This is Mon Bon Jacon. This was done when this was his first Cat Stevens record after having tuberculosis, which is more acoustic and folk based than like New Masters and Matthew and Son. And I guess some people might say it's a little bit early, because this album that came out after this was Tea for the Tillerman, and some of the production and songwriting and the arrangements were more confident or whatever. This is really simple album. I mean, some of these songs are almost just guitar and his voice. piano, maybe piano and guitar, two guitars. This is when he had Alan Davies, who did such a great job, and I think they had a friendship and partnership that was on most of those albums. I don't know about all. But the more I think about it, I really like this album because it's just so pared down compared to anything he ever did, really. I mean, quite a bit of it's just acoustic guitar or two acoustic guitars or acoustic guitar and piano sometimes. I think that kind of limited it in some ways compared to some of the more lush orchestration and arranging that came out on some of his other albums. But now that I'm older, I think I'm almost surprised I didn't rank this higher. It's got some great songs on it. Kathmandu, Lady D'Arbanville. Lady D'Arbanville, I believe, is written about the Mick Jagger. I don't think it was Marianne Faithfull, but Mick Jagger wrote My Sweet Lady Jane about her. It's the same. It's one of these women that shows up in several rock songs. Must have had something going for her. And Cat Stevens, I think, also wrote another song about her on Buddha and the Chocolate Box, Sun C79. That's kind of a retrospect on a love affair he was having at the time. So, but Lady D'Arbanville, it's kind of medieval. That's what I mean. It's folk music, but it's English, and it's got that kind of medieval Renaissance courtyard feel to it. Trouble, I Think I See the Light. This is a great album. I put it kind of down below some of his more famous albums, but actually this is a great album. If you like Cat Stevens, you should definitely listen to this album. It may be become one of your favorite albums because it's pure folk music. I mean, it's not as dialed up as even Tea for the Tillerman, which is still a pretty plain album, but it's a really good album and it's got some great songs on it. We're still getting into even better albums. Number 5, Numbers. I saw a thing on Facebook the other day. That's what made me want to do this. Cat Stevens himself was in the NewsTube feed talking about numbers and his excursions into numerology in 1975. Let's see. This came with the book. Gosh darn. Which I used to have. That came with the book. But this again is kind of Cat Stevens always trying something new. I think it was over a lot of people's heads back then. It was certainly over mine, but he actually, I learned more about it. I have this songbook back in the old piano vocal guitar days when you could actually buy music in the store. I bought it at Grinnell's in Pontiac, Michigan. But I have the songbook, but this came with the book, and it's based on a story. It's got more Cat Stevens art. He's quite a beautiful artist, I wish I could afford to buy one of his paintings original and put it in my house. But Cat Stevens was explaining it's kind of based on Pythagoras and numerology and ancient ideas from Greek and Egyptian numerology, that there are only two numbers, 1 and 0. And 1, of course, is the world we live in. Everybody has an identity. Everybody's kind of quantified. We all do that. And then there's 0, which is the absence of value. So this is really neat. All the songs on here are based on numbers. There's Monad's Anthem, Novim, which is 9, Novim's Nightmare, and they're great songs. But the kind of character that's sort of whimsical and causing trouble everywhere apparently is Jazero, which is 0, no value, the absence of value, which in a way is freedom and liberation. So the concept of the album was over my head. I was only like 14 or 15 when this came out, and apparently over a lot of people's heads. Cat Stevens himself said it wasn't very successful. But actually, now that I look back on it, this was a really good album. It maybe was one of his most interesting albums. And again, like I said, I always think, like, I've been in liberal arts education for all these years. That this is a liberal arts education album. It's got numbers, art, music, it's got a concept, it's got a kind of a cosmology interest to it. I don't mean to make it sound like it's a PhD dissertation or something, but it's a really, really good album. It's a very smart album, and it's very true to the quest of mind and spirit. And I think this might be one of his more interesting albums. I put some other ones higher, but it's well done. The music is great on it. But I think for people to really appreciate it, you had to kind of get into this story of the numbers and Jazero and Monad, and everybody had a number. And Pythagoras, as soon as you start talking about Pythagoras, most people are they're off listening to Kiss, rock and roll, all night party every day or something, which is great. That's fine. But I do think as years go by, this has kind of emerged as a very interesting album that kind of was in one ear and out the other when it came out. So I could have ranked it higher. It's interesting enough to be higher, but he's got some really good albums coming up. So that's where I put it. Some people might have put it lower, but I would not put it lower. But some people might. I imagine a lot of his diehard fans, they wouldn't see this as one of the ones they enjoyed the most. I don't want to say they didn't like it, but maybe some would say they didn't like it. But I like it a lot. Okay, number 4, and I bet some people are going to disagree with me, but I put Tea for the Tillerman. What a great album. Of course, 4, we've got some great albums coming up, but I bet some people will disagree that I put it 4. Some people might have put this at number 1. Certainly one of his most popular albums, got Wild World on it, Father and Son, Longer Boats, Sad Lisa, Into White, which is a really cool song, On the Road to Find Out, Where Do the Children Play, Hard-Headed Woman. Every one of those songs is terrific. So, and it's got, again, great Cat Stevens art on the cover. What an interesting creative guy, huh? And it's just a lot of it's 2 guitars, piano, maybe a little bit of bass, so a little bit of strings here and there, but it's quite sparsely instrumentated, but it's a very good album. I mean, what do you say? It's Tea for the Tillerman. It's not just a very good album. It's one of the great singer-songwriter albums of all time. I happen to like a couple of his other ones more that I ranked higher, so some of you might disagree with me. That's only testimony to how much I like some of these other albums coming up. There are a couple of them I bet a lot of people would not put over this one, but I did. And this one, I bet, is one of the ones that some people would put well behind Tea for the Tillerman, but I ranked it over Tea for the Tillerman, and it's Buddha in the Chocolate Box. I really like this album. I guess you can kind of see Cat Stevens moving away from Eastern mysticism, from kind of Western religion. He was always kind of interested in Eastern religion. I don't think this was meant to be some sort of a George Harrison type excursion into mysticism, but you can kind of see the interest in it maybe. Honestly, Cat Stevens, I know, was raised with some Christian background. That's certainly in some of his early music, and apparently he's looked at other faiths and I guess found Islam. But anyway, this is Buddha in the Chocolate Box. Supposedly he was on an airplane or something, and somehow or another the decision, he had to make a decision. Did he want Buddha or a chocolate box? He was reading something about Buddha, and then someone offered him chocolate, and he was trying to, I guess he saw that as kind of a metaphor for the carnal appetites versus the life of the spirit or something. But this is Buddha in the Chocolate Box. Once again, you get some awesome art on the record. That's all Cat Stevens art. But the reason I put this higher, I really like this album. I think it got kind of mixed reviews. It's more keyboard based. It's not as kind of folksy, acoustic-y. But it's got some wonderful songs on it that I think are very well done. And that's why I put it even higher than Tea for the Tillerman. I love King of Trees. I love Bad Penny, Ghost Town, Music. And of course you have Oh Very Young. And another really good song on here I've already mentioned, Sun C-79. Sun C-79 is an awesome song, and it's about this relationship he had, and he's kind of looking back on it. It's kind of like Robert Plant in 10 Years Gone. He's kind of looking back on a relationship. And, Sun C-79, I guess, is an apartment or a hotel room or something. And she was a junkie then, and you can tell he's been around the block a few times, and he's kind of looking back on that side of life. And but it's a really beautiful song. It's got parts of it that are very kind of quiet and dreamlike almost, and it's got sort of not agitated, but parts that are kind of more gripping, where you kind of wake up. But Oh Very Young, I remember in English class, I always had good English teachers. I'm lucky. My parents were English teachers, and I had great English teachers. But I remember in English class in 10th grade, I won't say the English teacher's name, but I remember she liked this record so much, and Oh Very Young, and the passing of youth, and Denim Blue, Fading Up to the Sky, if you want, and though you want him to last forever, you know he never will, you know. And it's just so, it's really good lyrics and meaning in the lyrics. And so I put this high, and I think it's a King of Trees is just a great song. King of Trees and Bad Penny on side 2 are terrific songs. I wore those out when I was a kid. I used to play King of Trees and Bad Penny on the guitar, which they're really piano songs. But I actually learned a lot of guitar playing this album because it was a little bit out of the box, particularly when you played it on guitar. It wasn't kind of like, as much as I like John Denver, it was definitely something pretty different. It was very catchy and lyrical. It wasn't weird or sort of so progressive you lost the music to it, but it was also very very distinct and I don't want to say experimental. Some might use the word experimental, but it was very there was a great sense of artistry and individuality in the music, and it's very English. But those piano-based songs on this are terrific. All right, number 2. Some people might have put this after T for the Tillerman, but I put Teaser and the Firecat. This is one of my favorite Cat Stevens albums. I think I ranked it over the T for the Tillerman, which is maybe a little bit more famous because of the strength of side 2. Side 2 has, Moonshadow. It has Peace Train. It has Morning is Broken. Those 3 songs right there on side 2, plus Bitter Blue and Tuesday's Dead. Side 2 is one of the best, whatever that is, 16, 17 minutes of music, however long it is, that I've ever enjoyed. I wore side 2. Side 1's nice. It's got The Wind on it, Ruby Love, How Can I Tell You That I Love You. But side 2 really takes off, and that's why I ranked it higher than a lot of those other albums, even though I'm kind of mostly basing it on side 2. Side 2 of this has Moonshadow, Morning is Broken, and Peace Train. And let me just say a little bit about Morning is Broken. Morning is Broken was based on the lyrics of an English poet named Eleanor Fargian. I used to have a biography of her. She was very interesting. I think she was old enough that you could almost consider her public domain, but her family still has copyright. So I think there were some copyright issues, but she wrote the beautiful lyrical setting of that English hymn, English Christianity. There's nothing wrong with Christianity. English Christianity. Morning is broken, like the first morning. Blackbird is spoken like the first bird. That's so beautiful, and that's Eleanor Fargian, and that's and that song was also a hymn. That was an English hymn called. I think it's actually called Bunessan. Is the old tune name, and like a lot of those old tunes that go back probably to whenever the Queen Elizabeth I or something. But it's actually if you look in a lot of old hymnals, you'll see that tune sung at Christmas as "Child in the Manger." So it was an English hymn. Maybe Cat Stevens sang growing up. I don't know, but it's a beautiful tune. Moonshadow, of course, is a great song. I think he was in Spain when he wrote that. And Peace Train, I think, was one. I think Peace Train, believe it or not, you might not think of it this way, but I think Peace Train was like Cat Stevens' Freebird. Peace Train was like Cat Stevens' Stairway to Heaven, or, every band back then had to have their big concert finale. The Outlaws, it was Greengrass and High Tides Forever. UFO had Love to Love. The Who, Won't Get Fooled Again. Cat Stevens, his Freebird was Peace Train, and I think they rocked it out in concert pretty good. I have not had a chance to see Cat Stevens, unfortunately. I will drop everything if I get a chance to see Yusuf Islam near me, but I haven't. But I know that Peace Train was always kind of, like I said, their Freebird. That was where they would kind of rock out and show off the band, and it's an upbeat song on the record, but they would kind of take it to another level in concert. But this is a super duper good side 2, and I ranked it over a lot of those other super really good albums because of the strength of side 2. Side 2 to me is just you've got 5 songs on there, and it's some of the best singer-songwriter English folk music ever. I like it. I think it's just a great album side. We have one honorable mention before I go to number 1. Wow, 35 minutes. I talk a lot, don't I? We have one honorable mention before I go to the number one album, which I guess if you know your albums, maybe you can calculate in your mind what it is. But the honorable mention is Cat Stevens' Greatest Hits. This came out, in the mid. I think it was. I don't know if it came out. I think before Numbers, maybe, or right after Numbers. And it's it's got all the it's kind of like the Eagles' Greatest Hits. This was actually quite a popular album. That's kind of weird because a lot of these stars were at the height of their career. James Taylor's Greatest Hits, John Denver's Greatest Hits, the Eagles' Greatest Hits. Everybody that was back. In the record store days. As soon as a band had pretty good collection of popular songs, they'd release Greatest Hits, and I guess that's what this was. And I read somewhere it was kind of the record companies kind of saw the day of Cat Stevens and artists like him was kind of passing, and they were trying to capitalize on his popularity. But it's got Peace Train. But the one it's got a couple on here that were kind of like a lot of those greatest hits. Some of them gave you something new. Gord's Gold had all those old songs that he'd done in Canada, but when he did them in Canada, they were just his super good bar trio. But they took them and they polished them up and made that great greatest hits album. But a lot of it was re-recorded. But you always get something new often. John Denver did that too. They re-recorded a lot of his early stuff. When he got rich and famous, and they put better instrumentation to it and everything. But it's got two good songs on it. One is Two Fine People. That's a really nice song. I heard him say one time he ripped off Wild World. I don't know, but I don't really notice it. But it's a really neat song. It's got kind of a PG-13 lyric to it, which I remember when I was a kid I was kind of enjoyed. And the Sam Cooke classic, Another Saturday Night. And I think, like I said, Cat Stevens. He likes a lot of that kind of 50s, party music, that R&B. And so this was an honorable mention. Everything on almost all these songs on here were released before, but it's a good record. Used to get a nice big poster of it, inside him playing an Ovation guitar. I used to have the poster in my room. Number one, my number one. My number one wasn't T for the Tillerman. It wasn't even Teaser and the Firecat. My number one is Catch Bullet 4. I don't know if this was, there's certainly a popular album. It was at the height of his popularity. I don't think with a lot of people the songs on here are as familiar as things like Wild World or Moonshadow. But this is a superb album from start to finish. It starts with Sitting, The Boy with the Moon and Star in His Head, Angel Sea, Silent Sun Night, Can't Keep It In. And then on side 2 you have that kind of nightmare, some of those songs that kind of, it was like almost like a concept album or a dream, starting with the 18th Avenue. And 18th Avenue really shows the how creative he was getting. There's a big, it's a beautifully written song, but it's got a big interlude in the middle that's really rocks out, and it's got really good piano in it, and the instrumentation is just excellent. And he was a good musician, and he had a good band. I mean, he wasn't just kind of up there playing Moonshadow with D chords and G chords. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but he really was doing some fine stuff on this. It's got that beautiful song, Ruins. I was in, I was going to say Pompeii there too, but I was actually in a place in Sicily. I think it was Salonite. I'd have to remember. I hope I'm, but these Greek temples that are in Sicily had collapsed in the Middle Ages from an earthquake, and these things are old. They're like go back to 600 BC or something, so they're really old. But in the Middle Ages, they were already old, but they collapsed in an earthquake, and they're just these big hunks of temple, like the size of this room. There'll be rocks just all over, from several temples just were reduced to smashed to smithereens. And I was walking around there by myself, and I was with a group, but I kind of walked out into the rocks, and I was a grown man, but I started thinking of that song that's on this album, and I hadn't thought of it in years, and it's Ruins. It's so quiet in the ruins, walking through the old town. Pompeii too. I hope that never happens to America, by the way. It's a nightmare, but the city's ruins. But it's a great song. And again, the lyrics on these albums, you get lyrics. Oh boy, I missed that. That's poetry. people that bought this album were enjoying poetry, like my grandpa did when he read Longfellow or Tennyson, or like my mother does when she still quotes poetry, even though she forgets so many things. But these albums were poetry. And look at his band there. And this, to me, is the perfect blend of, it still has that kind of folk sensibility. It's very acoustic, so he's not too electronic, but he does have organ, and it's. But the songwriting on this is really pushing the envelope, really trying to do some different things conceptually, not just musically, but trying to have different ideas and concepts, not just sort of ideas, but concepts, and from one song to another. This is, to me, the best album Cat Stevens ever did, and I love every one of those albums, particularly the last several. 40 minutes, oh my goodness. You can tell I love Cat Stevens. I grew up with him, and I think the world of his music. And, well, there's my ranking. I hope you enjoyed it. God bless you. And life and health to Cat Stevens, Yusef Islam, 100% respect.